Comparing and ordering fractions. Dylan and Pedro are painters. Pedro finished 3/4 of his wall in 1 hour, and Dylan finished 5/6 of his wall in the same time. Pedro told Dylan that he could paint the same sized wall using a paintbrush faster than Dylan could using a paint roller. Who do you think painted more? To solve this problem, you need to know how to compare and order fractions, which is what you will learn today. Click Next to begin. Here are the fractions that represent how much of the wall each painter has completed. In order to tell which fraction has the greater value, you could draw two equal-sized walls, dividing one into fourths and the other into sixths. Then you could shade in the appropriate number of segments in each wall. As you can see, 5/6 is greater than 3/4. So, unfortunately, Pedro was wrong. Dylan was able to paint more of his wall in an hour with the paint roller. Study the models, then click Next to continue. You probably don't want to take the time to draw pictures every time you need to compare fractions. Examine what happens when you divide both walls into 12ths. The shaded area of Pedro's wall covers 9 of the 12 parts, which can be represented by the fraction 9/12. In the same way, the shaded area of Dylan's wall covers 10 of the 12 parts, so it can be shown by the fraction 10/12. Do you notice anything interesting? The fraction 9/12 is equivalent to the fraction 3/4. It can be created by multiplying the numerator and the denominator of 3/4 by 3. Similarly, the fraction 5/6 can be renamed as 10/12 by multiplying both the numerator and the denominator by 2. Renaming these fractions with the same denominator makes it easy to see that because 10/12 is greater than 9/12, 5/6 must be greater than 3/4. Study this slide carefully, then click Next. Let's take a moment to examine this problem a little more carefully. What do you notice about the relationship between the denominators of the original fractions and the denominator of the new fractions? 12 is a multiple of both 4 and 6. That means that it is a common multiple. In fact, it is the least common multiple of 4 and 6. Now you can see how finding the least common multiple can be helpful in working with fractions. Click Next. Suppose you wanted to know which of these two fractions is greater. You first need to find the least common multiple of the two denominators. On a separate sheet of paper, find the LCM and type the answer into the denominators of the equivalent fractions. Roll over the hint if you need help. When you find the LCM of the denominators of fractions in this way, you have found the least common denominator. Click Next to continue. After the least common denominator has been found, the numerators of the fractions need to be changed to create equivalent fractions. In the first fraction, the denominator must be multiplied by 3 in order to obtain 6. This means that the numerator must also be multiplied by 3 in order to obtain an equivalent fraction. In the second fraction, the denominator must be multiplied by 2 in order to obtain 6, which means that the numerator must be multiplied by 2 as well. Complete the calculations and type the new numerators into both fractions. 4/6 is greater than 3/6, so 2/3 must be greater than 1/2. Now it's your turn. Which of these two fractions is greater? Begin by finding the least common denominator, or LCD, and typing it into both boxes. Next, type the numerators of the equivalent fractions into the boxes. Now choose the fraction that is greater. You can use this same procedure when you have more than two fractions. Suppose you are asked to put these fractions in order from least to greatest. Once again, you would start by finding the least common denominator. Which is the LCD of these three fractions? Now type in the numerators for each fraction. Use the numbers 1, 2, and 3 to order the fractions from least to greatest. Type 1 next to the least fraction. Now that you have seen how to compare and order fractions, you are ready to learn a shortcut. Let's go back to the original problem with Pedro and Dylan. You needed to know which was greater, 3/4 or 5/6. You were able to find the answer by rewriting each of these fractions with the same denominator. Notice something interesting. Suppose you begin with the numerator of the first fraction and multiply it by the denominator of the other fraction. The product is 18. Now multiply the numerator of the second fraction by the denominator of the first. This product is 20. Multiply the denominators together to obtain the denominators of the equivalent fractions. 18/24 is equivalent to 3/4, and 20/24 is equivalent to 5/6. Cross-multiplying in this manner will give you the numerators of equivalent fractions that can be compared to tell which fraction is greater. In this case, since 20 is greater than 18, you know that 5/6, the fraction next to the 20, is greater than 3/4. Notice that you could obtain this answer by finding only the numerators of the equivalent fractions. It may not be necessary to find the denominators as well. Click Next to try a problem using this shortcut. Use cross multiplication to determine which fraction is greater. Today you have learned two ways to compare and order fractions. The first method involves finding the least common denominator of the fractions and then rewriting the fractions as equivalents with that common denominator. The second method involves finding cross products. The fraction that has the greater cross product written next to its numerator has the greater value. You may use either of these methods to help you compare and order fractions. Please review any information that you do not understand.